Back in 2009, the NBA draft was filled with uncertainty, and one young guard from Davidson had captured the attention of scouts with his long-range shooting and fearless scoring. His name was Stephen Curry. In our reality, he was taken 7th overall by the Golden State Warriors, a decision that would transform not only the franchise but also the entire game of basketball. But imagine, just for a moment, if history had unfolded differently. Imagine if the New York Knicks, desperate for a savior, had landed Curry with their 8th pick. How different would the NBA look today? How different would Curry's legacy be? And most importantly, would Madison Square Garden finally have found its long-awaited hero? In this alternate timeline, the scene is set in New York City. The Knicks had been searching for a franchise cornerstone, someone who could revive the energy of the Garden and carry the team into a new era. Curry, stepping into this spotlight, would instantly become the face of the franchise. The pressure, the lights, the noise, everything in New York was bigger, and for a rookie still finding his footing, it was a challenge unlike anything else in the league. Yet, with every deep three-pointer, every dazzling crossover, and every improbable shot that found the bottom of the net, the Garden would roar in a way it hadn't for years. Knicks fans, starved for hope, would rally behind their new prodigy. Curry wouldn't just be a player, he would be a movement, the beginning of something that promised to redefine the team's identity. The early years wouldn't be easy. Unlike Golden State, where a patient rebuild and a supportive front office gave Curry room to grow, New York would bring chaos. Coaching changes, roster turnover, and front office drama would surround him. But the thing about legends is that they're forged in fire. Curry, underestimated for his size and durability, would lean into the challenge. The constant noise of the city, the endless headlines, and the pressure to deliver wouldn't break him. They would sharpen him. Every tough loss would fuel him. Every doubter would become motivation. And slowly, Madison Square Garden would become his proving ground. The Knicks, instead of stumbling in mediocrity, would begin to rise, powered by a style of basketball the league had never seen before. Free agents, eager to play alongside the sharpshooting phenomenon, would start seeing New York as a destination again. The Knicks would no longer just be the team of the past, remembered for Ewing and the gritty battles of the 90s. They would be the team of the future, led by a player who turned impossible shots into routine highlights. And then, as Curry's confidence and stardom grew, the ripple effect across the league would be undeniable. Golden State without him would never rise to dominance. The dynasty that reshaped basketball in California would never exist, and instead, it would be the Knicks leading the revolution. The NBA three-point boom, the spacing, the pace, it would all begin in the world's most famous arena. Think about that for a second. Madison Square Garden becoming the birthplace of modern basketball, Curry pulling up from the logo, and thousands chanting his name as the game itself evolved before their eyes. The story would build to its peak in the mid-2010s. Curry, now an MVP-caliber player, would drag the Knicks deep into the playoffs, facing off against powerhouses like LeBron James's Cavaliers and the Miami Heat. Every matchup would feel bigger, every showdown amplified by the stage of New York. Instead of being the underdog hero from Golden State, Curry would be the king of the biggest market in basketball, battling not just for championships, but for the soul of the league. The Knicks would become rivals to the best, and Curry, playing under the brightest lights in sports, would deliver iconic moments that fans would talk about for generations. But with success would come questions. Would Curry's body hold up under the physical grind of carrying such a heavy load? Would the Knicks front office, infamous for their questionable moves, surround him with the right pieces? Or would his brilliance be dimmed by dysfunction? The tension between greatness and collapse would hang over every season, making his journey both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. Yet the one thing that would remain constant was his ability to change the game. No matter what, Curry would still be the player who made shooting from 30 feet not just acceptable, but essential, and that in itself would ensure his place in history. In the long run, the consequences of Curry as a Knick would be profound. Championships might not come easily, but the transformation of the franchise would be undeniable. Kids across New York City would mimic his shots on playground courts. The Garden would return to glory, packed every night, buzzing with energy that could be felt across the league. And Curry himself, instead of being remembered as the face of the Warriors dynasty, would be immortalized as the savior of the Knicks, the player who brought joy back to basketball's biggest stage. So what's the takeaway from this alternate universe? Maybe it's that greatness finds a way no matter the circumstances. Or maybe it is that the places and people around us shape our stories just as much as our talent does. In this world, Steph Curry in New York wouldn't just change the Knicks, he would change the league, he would change history. And he would remind us all why what-if questions are so powerful. Because sometimes imagining the story is just as thrilling as living it. As the seasons rolled on, Curry's presence in New York began to redefine not only the Knicks but the entire culture of basketball in the city. The Garden, once a relic of past glory, was now the heartbeat of the NBA's new era. Every home game felt like an event, with celebrities packing the courtside seats, broadcasters marveling at his shooting range, and kids wearing number 30 jerseys across the boroughs. New York had always been called the Mecca of basketball, but now it wasn't just about streetball legends or the memories of the 90s battles. It was about the present. It was about Steph, and it was about a style of play the world had never truly seen before. The Knicks, historically plagued by mismanagement, would now find themselves forced to evolve. Curry's stardom meant that mediocrity was no longer acceptable. The front office, under relentless pressure from fans and media, would need to deliver players capable of elevating the team around him. In this timeline, imagine the ripple effects of free agency decisions. A star forward might decide to sign with New York, enticed by the chance to play with the most electrifying guard in the game. Veterans hungry for a championship might take pay cuts just to join the ride. Suddenly, the Knicks weren't just a historic franchise, they were relevant, dangerous, and on the rise. And think about the rivalries. LeBron James, the league's ultimate measuring stick, would see his greatest battles not with the Warriors, but with the Knicks. Instead of facing Steph in the finals as part of Golden State's dynasty, he would battle him in the Eastern Conference, year after year. Madison Square Garden and Quicken Loans Arena would become the twin stages of an epic saga. LeBron's physical dominance against Curry's sharpshooting brilliance, an unstoppable force against an immovable idea. The narrative of the NBA in the 2010s would be rewritten, shifting the balance of power away from the West and firmly planting it in the East. Of course, the journey wouldn't be without its struggles. The Knicks' heavy media presence and constant scrutiny would test Curry's resilience. Every missed shot, every playoff exit, every injury scare would be magnified 100 times more than it ever was in Golden State. Yet that very pressure could be what forged an even tougher version of him. Instead of being doubted early in his career and quietly growing into a superstar in the Bay Area, Curry's rise would be a public spectacle, his failures broadcasted just as loudly as his triumphs. And that contrast, the fragility of the moment against the brilliance of his play, would make every success even sweeter. Picture the defining games. A playoff series against the Miami Heat's Big Three, where Curry rains threes over Wade and Bosh, forcing LeBron into desperate drives to keep his team alive. A showdown against the Boston Celtics' aging core, where the Garden shakes with every shot as the Knicks finally prove they belong among the elite. The atmosphere would be electric, unlike anything seen in decades. Curry, with his effortless smile and childlike joy for the game, would transform the Knicks from a punchline into a powerhouse. And in doing so, he would bring something back to the league that had been missing, the sense that anything could happen when the lights were brightest. As the years passed, Curry's style of play would spread like wildfire. Kids in New York playgrounds would no longer dream of dunking. They'd dream of pulling up from 30 feet. Coaches across the league would adapt, building teams around spacing and ball movement. Analysts would debate whether this was sustainable, whether a team could truly win championships relying on a player so dependent on long-range shooting. But every time Curry hit another impossible shot in the clutch, those doubts would fade away. Basketball itself would bend to his will, and the Knicks would become the center of a revolution. Now let's think about the big picture, the championships. Would Curry have won as many rings in New York as he did in Golden State? Maybe not. The Knicks' history of dysfunction might still haunt them, and building a dynasty requires more than just one superstar. But even without multiple titles, Curry's impact would be undeniable. One championship in New York would mean more than 3 anywhere else. The Garden hadn't seen a title since 1973, and bringing one home would instantly make him immortal. The parade through the streets of Manhattan would rival anything the NBA had ever seen. Curry wouldn't just be a star, he'd be a legend etched into the fabric of the city itself. By the late 2010s, the league's landscape would look entirely different. The Warriors would never become the juggernaut that dominated half a decade. Kevin Durant might never join Golden State, instead taking his talents elsewhere, perhaps even pairing with Curry in New York to form one of the most iconic duos in history. The ripple effects would be endless. Rival teams adjusting their rosters, draft strategies shifting, and the entire story of the NBA rewritten around Madison Square Garden. And as Curry's career moved into its later years, the legacy conversation would burn brighter than ever. Instead of being remembered as the small market superstar who shocked the world, he would be the savior of basketball's biggest market, the man who restored the Knicks to relevance. His place in history would still be secure, but the narrative would be richer, layered with the weight of New York's expectations and the grandeur of its stage. Kids would argue in barbershops across the boroughs about where he ranked among the greats, and fans would recall the countless nights when the Garden felt alive because of him. In the end, imagining Steph Curry as a Knick isn't just about one player. It's about a city, a franchise, and a league that would have taken a completely different path. It's about what happens when the right player meets the right stage at the right time. Maybe he wouldn't have won as much. Maybe his body would have endured even more strain. But one thing is certain. The story of basketball would never be the same. The Knicks would finally have their icon. The Garden would once again be the center of the basketball universe. And Steph Curry, drafted by New York, would not just be a legend, he would be a myth, a once-in-a-generation savior whose story transcended the game itself. So when we ask the question, what if Steph Curry had been drafted by the Knicks? We're not just imagining a different career. We're imagining a different NBA, a different history, and perhaps even a different future for the sport we love. Because sometimes, one decision, one draft pick is all it takes to change everything.